Hello to you. We're in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, just across the water from Iran, which, according to the Pentagon, has faced the most intense day of bombing so far in the Middle East war. Tonight, Donald Trump has turned up the pressure once again, warning if any mines have been placed in the Strait of Hormuz. That's the narrow waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply is exported. They'll face military consequences at a level never seen before. Well, strikes across Iran have been relentless today, with these pictures showing smoke after an attack in the Quds district of the capital, Tehran. A U.S. human rights group says more than 1,245 people have died since the conflict began, including at least 194 children. The UN estimates around 100,000 people have lost their homes, while the Iranian Red Crescent reports more than 4,000 civilian buildings have been destroyed. Here in the United Arab Emirates, an Iranian drone strike has caused a fire at the biggest oil refinery in the Middle East and one of the biggest in the world. The state oil company had to shut down operations at the Al Ruwais site, which produces more than 900,000 barrels of oil every day. It's the largest and latest energy facility targeted by Iran in the Gulf region. The human cost of Operation Epic Fury includes 140 U.S. military personnel who've been injured. That's according to the Pentagon. 7 have died. Meanwhile, the UK's response to the conflict continues to ramp up, with the warship HMS Dragon leaving Portsmouth en route for Cyprus. We'll have more on that a little later. And we're going to take a look at the damage being caused to Iran's war machine. But first, Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, has our top story tonight on the 11th day of the war.
Iranians for or against the regime are on the wrong end of a terrifying onslaught. Look at the smoke on the horizon. Those are big attacks on important targets. Iran's infrastructure, civilian as well as state, is being destroyed. In Tehran, rescue workers are at full stretch, looking for bodies, hoping for survivors. This was an apartment building hit yesterday. The target isn't clear, but civilians were killed here. The Americans, for all their overwhelming power, have not spelt out a specific political objective for this war. In Washington, the defense secretary simply says victory is coming and many more bombs.
Today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever.
This is the airport at Kerman in southeastern Iran. And this was from a family car in a town near Tehran. At different times, Donald Trump has mused that all this is about regime change, or about unconditional surrender, or to install a compliant government, or to encourage a popular uprising. At the border with Turkey, a steady stream of Iranians had decided not to risk their lives in the bombing, waiting to find out.
Sometimes we felt like we are dying, but it was nearby.
Yes, a lot of bombing, a lot of
Fire.
even around 500 meters around our house, something like some bomb dropped and then a full building shattered.
In Florida on Monday, Donald Trump, with his envoy Steve Witkoff, was not focusing on regime change, as the Iranian regime is much more resilient than they expected. The economic consequences of the war are hitting American voters, so it's time to shape a victory narrative.
The stated objectives for Operation Epic Fury remain the same: destroy the terrorist regime's ballistic missiles, raise their Iranian missile industry to the ground, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, and ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. When they are achieved, then it will ultimately be up to the president to end this operation.
Sirens were sounding again in Jerusalem. Israel has its own agenda, destroying the regime in Iran and sending its army across the border wire into Lebanon, responding to rockets from Hezbollah, Iran's Lebanese ally, with an intensifying and broad assault deep inside Lebanon itself. The fear there is a repeat of the destruction inflicted on Gaza. Israel says it's making the region safer.
We are now witnessing Iran's savage attacks against almost all the countries in the region. This is how it behaves without a nuclear umbrella. Imagine what it could do if it had one.
In the Gulf, foreigners were waiting for evacuation. This was in Riyadh, the Saudi capital. Iran's strategy of spreading the war to America's allies is inflicting economic pain. This was in Dubai. And for the US, complicating the politics of fighting the war. At the UN, Iran's foreign minister reflected deep-seated defiance in the Islamic regime in Tehran towards the US and Israel.
Their intention is clear: to terrorize civilians, massacre innocent people, and cause maximum destruction and suffering.
The center of the war remains Tehran, where casualties are rising. This will finish, perhaps soon, but the evidence of past conflicts is that it's harder to end wars that do not have a precise political objective from the outset. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
Well, as ever, for The View from America, let's join Sarah Smith, who's live in Washington. Sarah, we saw oil prices spike yesterday because of the conflict, and Donald Trump tonight, he's tried to suggest he's got a remedy.
Yeah, I think it is ever more clear just how worried they are in Washington, and President Trump is, about the effect this conflict is having on the price of oil. And he's trying to reassure markets it's not going to be a long, drawn-out war. And this evening, he was posting on social media, focusing on the Straits of Hormuz. Now, that's the narrow waterway in the Gulf through which so much of the world's oil has to pass through. And he posted on social media saying, if Iran has put any mines in the Hormuz Strait, and we have no reports of them doing so, we want them removed immediately. So he's saying that the US doesn't know if any mines may have been laid, but if they have been, they must be removed, and threatening Iran with severe consequences if they don't do that. He is kind of trying to have it both ways here, reassuring the markets that if any mines are threatening commercial shipping lanes, America will deal with it, but not wanting to spook them into thinking that there might be mines in the Straits of Hormuz. What it does do, though, I think, is focus just how much they care about the Straits of Hormuz here. And CENTCOM, the US Central Command, has said tonight that they've destroyed 16 inactive mine-laying boats in the region. So that's trying to raise confidence there. But I think what we've learned is that Donald Trump cannot risk a long, drawn-out conflict with these risks to the price of oil, and he probably will be wanting to end the conflict sooner rather than later.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Smith, our North America editor in Washington there. Well, as hundreds of thousands of Brits remain stranded in the region because of the war, the UK government has confirmed a second evacuation flight from here in Abu Dhabi. 173,000 British nationals have now registered their presence with the Foreign Office, and more than 45,000 have managed to return to the UK. Two more members of the Iranian women's football team, who are in Australia for the Asian Cup, have applied for humanitarian visas, bringing the total to 7. There are fears for their safety if they return to Iran after the players declined to sing their national anthem before a match last week. The side, along with coaching staff, arrived on the Gold Coast days before the war broke out. Here's Katie Watson.
The team bus parked in front of their hotel today meant only one thing. Iran's football players would soon be starting their long journey home from Australia. But this player appears to be doing it under duress, encouraged or forced by a teammate to board the bus to the airport. Their departure came just hours after the news broke that 5 players had escaped their hotel the night before.
Okay.
We were there when the minders clocked that the women had disappeared. Panicking, they tried to find them in the car park downstairs. To no avail, they'd gone. And shortly afterwards, these images showed the 5 footballers receiving their humanitarian visas at lightning speed.
These women are tremendously popular in Australia, but we realise they are in a terribly difficult situation with the decisions that they're making. But the opportunity will continue to be there for them to talk to Australian officials if they wish to.
So what do we know about some of the players? Zahra Ganbari is the 34-year-old team captain and top goal scorer, and a central figure in Iranian women's football. Zahra Sabali is a 32-year-old midfielder. She played every minute of Iran's 3 Asian Cup games this year. Artefe Ramazani-Zadeh, who's 33, is an experienced player in the national squad. But as the bus left, it was unclear whether any more women would be following their teammates. Supporters and activists making a last-ditch effort to convince more of the players to stay here.
It feels like a repeat of what we saw on Sunday evening after the match. Many people in the community trying to stop the bus from moving forward and heading to the airport with the rest of the team.
Concerns grew for the team after they declined to sing the national anthem at their first match with South Korea last week. Accused of being traitors back home in Iran, they sang the national anthem in subsequent matches, clearly under pressure. At least 2 more women are understood to have sought asylum just before flying out of Sydney. Katie Watson, BBC News, on the Gold Coast.
Well, since the US and Israel attacked Iran on the morning of February the 28th, the supreme leader has been killed. Its navy pretty much destroyed and vital infrastructure has been severely damaged. Donald Trump says America's barrage of missiles and drones has hit more than 5,000 targets and badly diminished Iran's ability to fight back. But what exactly has been hit? And what is Iran's capability to respond? Here's Paul Adams.
What the Americans are calling Operation Epic Fury has been relentless. Well on its way, says Washington, to achieving its goals.
1, destroy their missile stockpiles, their missile launchers, and their defense industrial base. Missiles and their ability to make them. 2, destroy their navy. And 3, permanently deny Iran nuclear weapons forever.
At the start, Israel and the US took out Iran's air defences, or what was left of them after last year's brief war. Between them, they've now carried out more than 5,000 strikes. They've hit targets all over the country, mostly in the west, south and centre. And they've been concentrating on several main categories. Iran's huge arsenal of ballistic missiles and launchers has been a key target. You can see how the warehouses at this missile base in Borazjan have been hit. They've also been going after drones and the factories that make them. This is a drone base in Ahvaz. The US claims to have destroyed much of the Iranian navy and its infrastructure. Here you can see damage at the port of Bushehr. And of course there's Iran's leadership. On day 1 they killed the Iranian leader and many of his top officials here in Tehran. Most of this has been highly coordinated, but some of it, notably Israel's attack on 30 Iranian oil depots, was not. Washington said to be dismayed at the sight of the billowing black smoke which blanketed Tehran. But Iran still has cards. The US may have sunk almost 50 of its ships, including one torpedoed off the coast of Sri Lanka. But threats to attack shipping in the Strait of Hormuz means that very few vessels are daring to pass through one of the world's most important waterways. In addition to mines, Iran has scores of small fast boats that have, in the past, caused havoc. They could still pose a challenge.
We'll look at the range of options to set the military conditions to be able to do that. And then, like we always do with every potential mission, come to the Secretary and the President with both what are the resources required, what is the command and control required, and what are the risks.
Iran's drone and missile attacks have dwindled. It may be running out, it may be holding back. For all the damage already done, no one is declaring victory yet. Paul Adams, BBC News.
That's it from us here in Abu Dhabi. Victoria will have more over on Newsnight on BBC Two, just after 10:30. Hello to you.
Hi, Clive. Yes, following the most intense day of strikes yet, the White House doubles down on claims that the war will continue. So when could this conflict end? Join us live on Newsnight 10:30, BBC Two, iPlayer and around the world on BBC News. See you soon.
Victoria, thank you.
Well, HMS Dragon has set sail for Cyprus more than a week after an RAF airbase on the island was hit by an Iranian drone. The Defence Secretary John Healey praised Royal Navy personnel and staff, who he said had worked flat out to prepare the ship for deployment. It left Portsmouth Harbour this afternoon and will take several days to reach Cyprus. The government had been criticised for being slow to act, given the continuing threat in the region. Here's our defence correspondent, Jonathan Beale.
It's a week since the government announced HMS Dragon was being sent to the Mediterranean. Finally, this afternoon, she left Portsmouth on her way to potential danger. The Royal Navy's most advanced air defence destroyers spent the last week being loaded with stores and ammunition, now waved off by well-wishers and families of the 200-strong crew. A sense of pride for Darren Smith, whose son George is going on his first major deployment.
I think we've done a really good effort in getting her to sea in 8 days. No matter what the press has said in the past, I think that's a good commitment. What the situation with the Navy is, it's probably not in the best position it can be, but however, this is what we've got at the moment.
I'm glad to see it go. I'd have to say better late than never, but I'm glad to see it go.
It'll take nearly a week before HMS Dragon arrives off the coast of Cyprus. The government bolstered security there before the US and Israel attacked Iran. Extra jets and air defence systems. But that didn't stop one drone hitting RAF Akrotiri, leaving this hole in a hangar, and raising questions as to whether a warship should have been sent sooner. Britain is slowly becoming more involved in this war. At RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, US bombers took off for their first missions from the UK. The government had initially refused a request to use British bases. It changed its mind after Iran retaliated. The government still insists these are defensive operations and that Britain is not directly involved in this war. But there are fears of escalation. The government today put another ship on standby. It said RFA Lyme Bay, now in Gibraltar, was being readied as a precaution, potentially to evacuate citizens from the region. More evidence it's becoming harder to stay on the sidelines of this conflict. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
Well, the 11-day war is already having an impact on the cost of everyday items here. Petrol prices have jumped again today and mortgage rates have risen too. Darshini David is here with more. Darshini.
Rita, thank you. Yes, more costly swings in the markets, not just because of the chaos in the Middle East, but also on social media. This post on the US Energy Secretary's X account claiming the US Navy had escorted a tanker to safety through the Strait of Hormuz appeared briefly before being deleted, apparently uploaded in error. In that time, the Brent crude oil price dipped to around $80 per barrel before rebounding. Now, this is a sign of exactly how jumpy markets remain. Oil prices are down sharply compared to Monday. That's after President Trump's earlier attempts at reassurance, but it's still very much higher than it was just last month as unease over the production and safe passage of energy in the Middle East persists. And here, the Chancellor was concerned that some heating oil suppliers and petrol retailers may be taking advantage to inflate prices.
Yesterday, some petrol retailers charged almost 180p per litre, while others were charging less than 130p per litre. This government will not tolerate price gouging, and I will be meeting with petrol retailers this week to raise concerns to get prices down at the pumps for all of our constituents.
But she deflected requests for help. Reform, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems are all calling for a freeze on fuel duty to be maintained. Others want the cost of heating oil reduced or to stop gas and electricity bills from rising. Now, even at current prices, the cost of such support could easily top £10 billion, and that's before pressure to boost defence spending. As we continue to pay for the help doled out during the COVID pandemic and the Ukraine war, the affordability of any more emergency packages is in question. But is help actually warranted? Now, just consider inflation here, because higher fuel prices are painful. The official forecasters think that at the moment, inflation may end the year perhaps at 3% rather than 2% as previously thought. That is unwelcome, but by no means a return to the scale of price rises seen just a few years ago during the Ukraine war. But even that means further interest rate cuts could be in doubt, and that has pushed up the cost of new mortgages. A typical 2-year deal is now 4.93%, the average 5-year fixed rate above 5% for the first time since November. Those mounting costs are a further blow to consumers' pockets after a bruising cost of living crisis, risking knocking their confidence about the future. And there could be other price pressures coming down the pipeline. Here's a clue about where these might come from. One shipping giant warned of the costs it's incurring for disruption and fuel that might affect consumers, along with potential delays.
And we do about 40,000 containers in and out of the Gulf every week. So this is going to pile up very fast, and there is very limited areas where you can stage that much cargo. You get a lot of questions from customers about what's going to happen with their cargo. You have a lot of perishable goods, food stuff that absolutely needs to move or risks getting spoiled. So you go into a lot of the contingency.
Well, Saudi Arabia's state oil company warned today that a prolonged conflict could be catastrophic for the global economy. The Chancellor is pinning her hopes on a rapid de-escalation of hostilities to get out of a potential bind. But in the meantime, as households and businesses start to count the cost, the government's prime mission, boosting growth, may already be at risk. Rita.
Darshini, thank you very much. The BBC understands that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has written to the Home Secretary saying the controversial Al-Quds Day march, which was set to take place in London this weekend, should not be allowed to go ahead. The annual event has been criticised for representing the views of the Iranian regime and for anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hostility. Our UK correspondent Daniel Samford is with me. Do we know more about the reasoning behind this?
Yeah, I mean, there are calls most years for the Al-Quds Day march to be banned. It was a march that was initiated by the former Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, and it's always been seen as a pro-Iranian march, though the organisers say that it's more a pro-Palestinian march than a pro-Iranian march. Those calls grew when, for example, marchers were holding Hezbollah flags on the march a few years ago until that group was banned. And then 2.5 years ago, the calls grew even further after the Hamas attacks on Israel on the 7th of October. But the calls are really, really strong this year after those thousands of people were killed by the Iranian government, thousands of their own citizens were killed by the Iranian government, and of course because of the ongoing attacks by Iran on their neighbours following the attacks by Israel and the United States this year. So I understand that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has written to the Home Secretary and said that he would like for permission to ban this march this year on grounds of serious disorder, and that's because of the risk of the people on the Al-Quds Day march clashing with people who are against the Iranian government. For example, there's a group called the Lion Guard of Iran who have said that they're going to hold a big counter-demonstration, and because of all those protesters being killed in January and because of being a time of war, I think the police are just very worried that feelings will be running too high for it to be held safely.
OK, Daniel, thank you. Daniel Samford there.